to try
Yeah,
it
I'm
out?
gonna try it in the background and see if it works, and then I'll let you know,
Okay.
and then I'll let everyone in. Okay.
Okay, so we're ready to get started.
Yep.
Okay, welcome everyone to our Zoom Q&A. And this is just like our normal Q&A, except during this time we go by a show of hands for people in the Zoom. Now, if you're not aware, Carl has just made an adjustment with Zoom. So now it's possible for someone, let's say someone listening on YouTube right now, who's not on Zoom. Now, before they could only watch, they couldn't communicate with us, but now they can call in. Carl, maybe you can post the phone numbers on the YouTube page. You know, not sure if you hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Oh, good. Maybe you could post it there into the comments or something, or I'm not sure if you can embed it on the page, but whether there or anywhere, now the idea is that people can just call in, and they won't be a part of the Zoom. So that's a good thing that will, if it works, we'll try to advertise in the future. And what we're actually moving towards is a combo of Zoom audio video. And Lord willing, some point in the future, you know how I sit in the chair during the week, and we take the questions over the FCC. Well, we're going to try to have the same setup where I would be in the chair, and maybe we'll have like a TV screen position, so I can sit in the chair and see everyone like I'm seeing you now on Zoom audio or video, and yet also have the phone beside me, so that if someone wanted to participate through Zoom video, they could do that. Or if they just wanted to call, they could do that too. And it should open things up for, just making it more varied, and possible ways for people to get involved. Okay, now here on Zoom, if you have a question, hit reactions at the bottom of the screen, and then click on raise your hand, and we'll see your hand on the right, and then we'll send you the link. Carl, if someone were to call in with a question or call that number, well, how do we know they have a question? Will their hand, will a hand
They
appear?
can raise their hand on the phone. So I'll have to figure out which number, but I think it's going to be 6 to raise their hand, and we're going to see it on the right here. And then we can take their call.
Okay, so if someone calls in, and by the way, it's a toll-free number, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a toll-free number now. So in the past, with the FCC, when people use their phones, they some were charged, for the minutes, but now they'll be calling a toll-free number. The whole thing should be completely free. With Zoom is free, Zoom video, and now the audio will be a toll-free number that they can call in. So, that's a positive. Okay. So let's go with our first question tonight. Tommy will send you the link and you can take the mic.
Good evening. Can you hear me, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hear you very well.
I just have a few chapters you can look at. Proverbs 6:18.
Okay, Proverbs 6, verse 18. It says, a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief. Now, this is part of the things that God hates. He says 6 things in verse 16 doth Jehovah hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him, and one would be a heart that devises wicked imaginations and feet that be swift in running to mischief.
Proverbs 1:16.
Proverbs 1:16. For their feet run to evil and make haste to shed blood.
And 2 more. Isaiah 59:7.
Okay. Isaiah 59, verse 7. Their feet run to evil and they make haste to shed innocent blood. Their thoughts are thoughts of iniquity, wasting and destruction are in their paths.
And last one, Romans 3:15.
Their feet are swift to shed blood.
Okay, so does feet represent the will of somebody's will?
Yeah.
But the word swift can also mean haste. But I don't understand how haste and swift, can you explain that?
Well, yeah, you're right. The feet, like the hands, represent the will. So when someone's feet are swift to shed blood, it means their will, and also those other scriptures, Isaiah 59:7, their feet run to evil and they make haste to shed innocent blood. So man's will is completely given over to sin. He's dead in trespasses and sin, and so his will is inclined in that direction towards wickedness, whatever it may be. You know, people have various sin weaknesses, but it's all sin. It's all sin. One sinner prefers a certain type of sin, and another sinner prefers another type of sin. But all sinners prefer sin. They're quick, very fast in that direction. Where remember how God uses the word run in relationship to his commandments in Psalm 119. I will run the way of thy commandments. That's the new heart and the new nature given to the child of God, where now our inclination is changed and our will has been transformed, and we have that desire to do the will of God. It's basically describing the same thing, only the opposite. The child of God goes according to the commandments. The wicked go according to their opposition to the commandments, or in their transgressions of the commandments, and both will go speedily, or they will both go in a fast way, because it's the way their heart is. It's the condition of their heart that leads to the inclination in the things they do in their life. But thank you for sharing those verses. And let's go to Michael. Michael will send you the link and then you can take the mic. Excuse me. Okay, Michael. Yeah, please go ahead with your question. No, we're not hearing you, Michael. Michael, we're not able to hear you. There may be a problem with your microphone. Maybe we can send the link again. Can we try that again?
Hey, Michael, try to adjust your mic settings. Maybe you have it on the wrong mic.
Carl, if Michael can hear you, why don't you ask him to call that 800 number? Maybe that'll work for him.
Okay, yeah, I'll send him a private message.
Okay. Okay, Michael, Carl's going to contact you and he's going to give you a toll-free number that maybe you can call us, and we would like to try that out anyway, so hopefully you'll be able to do that. Okay, let's go to Tipperary. Tip, please go ahead and take the mic.
Hi, Chris. I was wondering if you could read two verses for me. The first one is in Acts 2:22.
Acts 2:22. Ye men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs, which God did by him in the midst of you, as ye yourselves also know.
Sorry, Chris, I gave you the wrong one. It's Acts 2:20. Sorry.
That's okay. Acts 2:20, the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before that great and notable day of the Lord come.
And the sister verse would be Joel 2:31.
Okay, Joel 2:31. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and the terrible day of Jehovah come.
So I'm wondering why it says before. Is there a, like the moon, that points to May 21, 2011. So why does it say before the great day? Is there a pause in between, or why not simultaneous with the day of judgment? Why before?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have an underline here too. I'm not sure why God is saying that. Now we know that it was immediately after the tribulation that the sun is darkened and the moon does not give its light. But as soon as the tribulation ends, that's the day of the Lord. So the darkening of the sun and so forth is happening in the day of the Lord or in the day of judgment. So it doesn't seem to fit with that understanding, and I don't have the answer. So I don't think I can help you in explaining why the Lord uses this word before.
Okay, and there's no other interpretation that can be applied to before, no?
I don't know.
I think from before, I tried to look it up before 6440, and all I could come up with was from before the face of. Sometimes it's used from before the face of, but I don't know if. Then even Harold Camping did a study on this years ago, and he mentioned before, and he said that word before in the Greek is before. This is before. He said it's definitely before because it's used in before the.
Well, did Mr. Camping have an explanation why it's there?
Well, back then he thought it was before. This is years ago when he did this study. It's
You
before.
mean he thought the sun will be dark and moon and
Yeah,
the
but
blood
this
and
is
all
back in
that? And
the
it's
90s.
not yet Judgment Day?
Yeah, but this is back in the 90s before he understood what he did, let's say 10 years later. This is when he was still serving. But he did say, I looked up that word before, and it's the Greek word that's before the cock crows. It's definitely before, but he's trying to establish that it was before the day of judgment. The sun would be darkened. So I don't know if he changed in later years, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll try to check it out because I mean he did go through Acts, so he would have, and the Acts study that was more recent than the 90s, wasn't it? When Mr. Camping went through Acts, because that led to the end of the church. Yeah, it would have been the 90s.
Yeah, but that was a verse that he just pulled up. That was a verse he was going through Joel at the time, and he was looking for all the verses of the moon turned to blood, and he was spot on in a lot of them. But he did, this wasn't a study on Acts; it was a study on Joel, and he was using Acts.
Mhm.
He was using these verses to, yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you for bringing it up.
Thanks.
I've always had problem area here. So it's good to be reminded that and specific questions concerning it of things we need to look into. But thank you. And let's go to Evelyn. Evelyn, we'll send you a link and you can take the mic.
Hi, I noticed that Mike Aneen had a question on the Q&A, and he said that hopefully in the Zoom he can present it. So can I read it? Maybe that's probably what he's calling.
Yeah. So he wrote it in Sunday Q&A on Facebook?
Yes. And he said maybe he can present it during the Zoom.
Okay.
His question was in Galatians 3:20. Chapter 3, verse 20.
All right, Galatians 3:20. I'll start in verse 19 or verse 18. For if the inheritance be of the law, it is no more of promise, but God gave it to Abraham by promise. Wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of transgressions, till the seed should come to whom the promise was made, and it was ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator. Now, a mediator is not a mediator of one, but God is one.
He wrote, I really don't understand what the question is, but maybe you do. Now, not a mediator of one, is this where the Godhead, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, 3 in 1, can be attempted to understand by God's grace? That's what he wrote.
No, a mediator is not a mediator of one. Can this be
where the Godhead can be attempted to understand by God's grace?
Yeah, I'm not sure what he's getting at. Well, we know God is one, and this is another scripture that is telling us. Oh, there's Michael. This is another scripture that's telling us that God is one God. We also know he is three persons, and this is telling us of the promise, which is the gospel promise, that Then there's questions about the law. It was added because of transgressions. Till the seed should come, Christ is the seed, to whom the promise was made. All the elect in Christ are counted for the seed. And it was ordained by angels or messengers in the hand of a mediator. Now, a mediator is not a mediator of one, but God is one. I'm not sure what Michael's question is, but I myself do not have a good understanding of what's being said in this verse. So that's a problem. I don't know if I can answer Michael's question on it without myself having a better understanding of what's being said here.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. And okay, does anyone else have a question? Okay, I don't see any other questions. So what we'll try to do in the future, not sure exactly when we're going to be able to do this, to combine these things, but we're working towards that, maybe in a few weeks or a month or two. And that will be very, very helpful to have a toll-free number. Then we can post the number anywhere, and you can encourage people to call and even say, well, look, it's toll-free. Okay, we have a couple of questions. Gary, we'll send you the link and then you can take the mic.
Good evening, Chris. Good evening, everyone. Chris, I just have a question about King Solomon. I've been doing a lot of studying into it. It seemed like we do have that King Solomon was unsaved king. In 1 King chapter 11, verse 4 and verse 6 tells that he did not have the heart of David, his father. All right. So we know that he was absolutely an unsaved king. But I found a verse that might be, I don't know if it shows his salvation or not, but I'm going to let you see what you think. We know that God warned Solomon to keep his commandments 3 times. Chapter 3, verse 14, chapter 6, verse 12, chapter 9, verse 6. Twice God, in these 3 times, God talked to Solomon by a vision. In chapter 3, God reveals the heart of King Solomon, that he was unsaved, he was adulterous, he went after his wife's false gods, and God judged him from verses 9 to 39. God judged Solomon. All right. God spoke to Solomon in verses 9 to 13 directly. All right. So God judged King Solomon. After that, God sent the prophet Ahijah from verse 29 to the end of the chapter. And Ahijah told Jeroboam that he was going to rent the kingdom from King Solomon. All right. Can you read 3 verses for me, please?
Yeah. Which verses?
For 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 11 and 12.
1 Kings 11 and verse 11. Wherefore Jehovah said unto Solomon, for as much as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant, notwithstanding in thy days, I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. Howbeit,
And one-
I will not rend all the kingdom, but will give one tribe to thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen.
The next verse is in verse 34. This is the key verse.
Howbeit, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince all the days of his life for David my servant's sake, whom I chose, because he kept my commandments and my statutes.
All right. So in this verse, can you explain verse 34?
Well, I'd have to read more of the context, see who's being referred to. He said to Jeroboam back in verse 31, take the 10 pieces, for thus saith Jehovah the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon and will give 10 tribes to thee. But he shall have one tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, because that they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in mine eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgments, as did David his father. Howbeit I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince all the days of his life, for David my servant's sake, whom I chose, because he kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand, and will give it unto thee, even 10 tribes. Well, it sounds like it's referring back to Solomon.
Yes, it is. My question is, in verse 34, it says that he will not take the whole kingdom from King Solomon. He will not lose, the kingdom will stay intact with King Solomon. And the second part of the question is, I will make him prince all his days. At this time, King Solomon's already old. And it says that God will make him king. He's already been ruling for almost 40 years. Would that be an indication that God is finally going to make him a king, like a believer who becomes a king, prince, and prophet to God? I will make him prince all his days.
I don't think so, because I think it's just God indicating that he's going to allow Solomon to continue to be king. So a king and prince are fairly interchangeable, and he will continue to rule until death, all of his days. And I think that's what's going on here. I will make him prince all the days of his life for David, my servant's sake. Now, yes, he was king, but he has done something that is very offensive, that is abomination. It's a terrible thing in the way that Solomon has sinned by allowing all these idols and false gods to be worshipped, and even building some of their temples and so forth. And so God ought to immediately put him away or take the kingdom from him. But it's as though at this point, no, I will allow him to continue. And I think in that sense, the language of make him to be king or to be prince, what did it say? I will make him prince all the days of his life for David, my servant's sake. I think it's just indicating he will continue to rule over Judah or over all Israel, the combined Israel, until the time when his son begins to reign, and then what the prophet said to Jeroboam will take effect.
How about that? It said he did it for Christ's sake, which David, my servant, is referring to Christ. Christ kept the commandments, would not be referred to like when we sin, God, if we're a true believer, God had covered that already. He kept the commandments for us.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But I just think there's too much other information here. And everything has to harmonize together. Everything has to fit together. But this is an interesting verse. I think it needs to be, thoroughly looked at, and I'll hopefully find some time to look at this a little closer. But right now, I would just maintain, that Solomon was an unsaved individual, and what we read earlier in this chapter concerning the nature of his heart and so forth, it's very negative and indicates someone who is under the wrath of God. But again, I'll hopefully find some time to look into that. So I appreciate it.
There's one other question in verse 11, please.
Of same chapter?
Yes, same chapter.
Okay. It says, wherefore Jehovah said unto Solomon, for as much as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee and will give it to thy servant.
And at the end of the verse, it says, I will surely rend. I will surely, which it's the same exact Hebrew word with rend.
Yeah.
So it's like saying.
Yeah. Well, I will surely die whenever, not all the time, but many times, whenever you see surely, as in the case in Genesis, the day you eat thereof, you will surely die. It's doubling the word, the Hebrew word. So dying, you will die. And
yes.
and I suppose it's the same here.
It's the same here.
Rending, I will rend.
Yes.
Would be the way of stating, and it's a strong emphasis on the thing being done.
Yes. But yet God never rent the kingdom from Solomon. He did it from his son.
Surely
like,
from
for Adam and Eve,
thy servant.
For Adam and Eve, God they did die. Dying they shall die. For the believer, we don't. I'm trying to think is, in this case for King Solomon, since God didn't surely rend the kingdom from him, would that be another indication that he might have become saved?
Well, no, we have to understand this because God said it. He said it to Solomon. So it's true of Solomon in some way. And it could be in the spiritual way of who Solomon represents, the corporate church. But yeah, I see you're looking very carefully into this chapter, and
yes.
you're hitting on some good questions and good points, and I appreciate your call and bringing these things up. And
Sure.
we'll try to look at it, Lord willing.
All right, thank you.
But thank you. And
you're welcome.
now let's go to Orette. Orette, we'll send you the link and you can take the mic.
Hello.
Yes, hello. Please go ahead.
How you doing? Can we look at Revelations 1:8, please?
Yeah, Revelation 1, verse 8. Says, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord, which is, and which was, and which is to come, the Almighty.
Okay, so my question is, because I was always taught that Christ was going to come twice. Like I was always like the second coming of Christ, like growing up in the churches, whatever. And like we know that Christ came in 30 when he went to the cross in 33 AD, and then he came again in 2011 to bring judgment on the world, and then he's coming in 2033. So my question is this verse prove that Christ is coming 3 times, or is there any other verses that you can show to support that? Or can you explain what it says when it says which is, which was, and which is to come?
Yeah. As far as Christ coming, he came the first time, born of the Virgin Mary. And we were told in Acts 1 when he went up into the heaven that he will come in like manner. So there is reference to the second coming, and there's various verses that speak of the coming of the Lord. So now it's a question of how is he going to come? What is meant by the language of the coming of the Lord, or the second coming of Christ? And when we study the Bible, we find that he came like a thief in the night against the church. The same language in the book of Revelation, there's reference made or warning made to the church that Christ would come upon them like a thief in the night. And we know judgment began at the house of God, the church. And we know Christ is the judge. So if judgment began at the house of God, Christ the judge carried out the judgment. And he did so invisibly because it was a spiritual judgment. And he caught them all by surprise. And they were unaware of that, denied it, and so forth. And then on May 21, 2011, there was a transition from judging the church exclusively, only the church. It expanded on that date to judge all the world, all unsaved inhabitants of the world. And the Bible uses the same kind of language. He came like a thief in the night. And actually, much of the same language in Jeremiah 25. God speaks of giving the cup to the city called by his name, the church, and then the same cup will be given to the nations. And it's all part of the overall day of the Lord, judgment day. Judgment began at the house of God. We can trace it all the way back to the year 1988, 1994 officially, with the judgment on the churches and congregations. And when we look at the official beginning of that judgment in the Jubilee year of 1994, in September of 1994, we see a timeline that then matches the first coming of Christ, identical from Jesus's birth in 7 BC to 33 AD on the cross. That was his first coming. Jubilee, and 7 BC was the Jubilee year. And then the Jubilee year of 1994 to 2033, it's a mirror image. It's exactly 2,000 years from the beginning, 7 BC to 1994, and exactly 2,000 years at the end, 33 AD to 2033 AD, both starting with Jubilee years. And the time period is identical, 39 actual years, 40 inclusive, for both comings of Christ. And the one that it all began judging the church, transitioned to judging the world. So his second coming is all about judgment. It's completely related to judgment, although he saved the great multitude. But there's been judgment since 1994 in one way or another, or one degree or another. And that judgment continues all the way to 2033. So Christ has been performing the role of judge. It'll be the 40th inclusive year in 2033. And that's all the Bible has to say about the coming of Christ. And so it's not like the coming to judge the church was his second coming, and the coming to judge the world on May 21, 2011 is the third coming, or that the end of the world, if the biblical evidence is correct, pointing to 2033, will be another coming. It's all part of the same coming from 1994, May 21, 2011, 2033. He's already here. He's already here. So we don't really, I think, want to use the language, he's coming to judge the world in 2033. He's already here spiritually judging the world. The word of God, the Bible, is here judging the world. It's only the completion of the judgment, finalizing the judgment, that happens in 2033. And it's all part of this present judgment. It's one whole. And that you know, if we were to define what is the second coming of Christ, it's a two-part tribulation: great tribulation, judgment on the church, and then tribulation, recompense of tribulation, judgment on the world, all judgment day, or all part of the day of God's wrath. But thank you for your question. And Gary, do you have another question? We'll send you the mic. We'll send you the link so you can take the mic.
Thank you. I do have another question. It's also related to King Solomon.
Okay.
Two references, 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 14.
1 Kings 3:14. And if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days.
The next one is 1 Chronicles 28, 7 and 8.
Okay, we're getting a little feedback. Carl? Not sure if it's that screen you have up there, if we're getting feedback from that. But I'm sorry, what was that verse?
1 Chronicles 28, 6 and 7.
1 Chronicles 28, 6 and 7. And he said unto me, Solomon, thy son, he shall build my house and my courts, for I have chosen him to be my son, and I will be his father. Moreover, I will establish his kingdom forever, if he be constant to do my commandments and my judgments as at this day. Now therefore, in the sight of all Israel, the congregation of Jehovah, and in the audience of our God, keep and seek for all the commandments of Jehovah your God, that you may possess this good land and leave it for an inheritance for your children after you forever.
Yeah, the first verse, it said that he will 14.
Walk in my ways and keep my statutes.
If he does, God will lengthen his days. In the second verse, he will keep the kingdom. In verse 34 of 1 Kings 11, it said he actually did that. God did actually give it to him on both the length of days and the kingdom in verse 34.
Of which chapter?
11, the one that we read the first time.
1 Kings 11 and
34.
34?
Yes, 34.
Howbeit I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince all the days of his life for David my servant's sake, whom I have chose, because he kept my commandments and my statutes.
So because of David, my servant, kept the commandments, King Solomon was able to keep the kingdom and all the days of his life.
Okay. Okay. Well, all right. Well, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know where to look to review what you're bringing up.
Yes.
Hopefully, I'll find some time to look into it. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
All right. Tipperary, you can take the mic. Or I'm sorry, we'll send you the link and then you can take the mic.
I think you did.
Oh, okay, there it goes.
Yeah. So, yeah, if somebody else has a question, I can just wait,
No,
you know.
no, there's no other question.
Zephaniah chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, please. Or 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, Zephaniah 2. Verse 1 says, gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired. Before the decree bring forth, before the day passes the chaff, before the fierce anger of Jehovah come upon you, before the day of Jehovah's anger come upon you, seek ye Jehovah, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment, seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be ye shall be hid in the day of Jehovah's anger.
Seek and before is the two words that really stand out to me here. Can you compare that with Jeremiah 29, 10 to 13?
Jeremiah 29:10. For thus saith Jehovah, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word toward you in causing you to return to this place. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith Jehovah, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Then shall ye call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you, and ye shall seek me and find me, when ye shall search for me with all your heart.
So he's saying seek him before the day of wrath, and then here after the 70 years, when the day of wrath comes, he's saying seek him with all your heart, because to call upon, because he is not probably, I'm sure he's given the elect a new heart, so they can seek him with all their heart. With the seeking, it's also in Zechariah 13:9 when they bring the third part to the fire and they seek him. So the seeking, what is the significance of the seeking him before in Zephaniah 2, 1 and 2, before the day of wrath? Is there a hidden meaning here? Because the seeking him before the day of wrath would really didn't contribute unless he gave them a new heart, and then they could seek him, because their work wouldn't contribute to.
Well, the seek the Lord while he may be found, as it says in Isaiah. That has been God's admonition, his encouragement, his command throughout the whole history of the world. In the day of salvation, seek the Lord before you die, and then your fate is sealed. That would have been any time throughout history. Or seek the Lord before the day of judgment come, and that's what's in view here. The decree, bring forth the day, passes the chaff, especially the reference is the chaff. That's used repeatedly to refer to the ungodly who perish in the day of judgment, as it says in Psalm 1. In Psalm 1, verse 4, the ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. Therefore, the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment. So it relates the wind driving the chaff away to the ungodly being unable to stand in judgment day. And so prior to that time, basically the command to seek God is the gospel. It is go to God, like blind Bartimaeus, and beseech him for sight. Thou son of David, how do we beseech him? Bartimaeus lays it out very well. Thou son of David, have mercy upon me. And or like the publican who beats upon his breast, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Crying out for mercy, going to God, placing yourself under the hearing of the word of God. You know, all that language we used to be very accustomed to hearing, you know, because it was the day of salvation, and it was time to encourage people to go to God, to boldly approach, though in a humble way, and cry out that he might save. So Zephaniah 2 is looking at it from that perspective, before the door shuts. Because once the door shuts, the commands in the Bible are no longer applied. Where it says seek the Lord in Isaiah 55, I think is where that's found. If we go over there, Isaiah 55, verse 6, seek ye Jehovah while he may be found, call ye upon him while he is near. And that's a time reference indicating that there is a day to come that he will not be able to be found and he will not be near. And we can see that in many places in the Bible that speaks of judgment day, and once the door shuts, that's it. As is the language of Luke 13. I'll read that in Luke chapter 13, verse 24. Strive to enter in at the straight gate. You see, God does tell us from time to time to do things. He does tell us, study, show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed. He commands, study. He commands to strive to enter in. He commands to seek. But it's only when people don't take the whole of the things that the Bible says and realize that we're even though God commands these things, we're still dead. And it's just the privilege. It's what he allowed the sinner to do, to beseech him in that way. Although it would always work out according to his salvation program. But here again, strive to enter in at the straight gate. For many, I say to you, will seek to enter in and shall not be able when once the master of the house has risen up. The implication here with the command to strive to enter in at the straight gate is before the door shuts. Strive to enter in before the door shuts, because for many will seek to enter in, and seeking to enter into the door is the same thing as seeking Jehovah, seeking God. They will seek to enter in and not be able, because the decree has come to pass. The day has come, and in the day of judgment, the door shuts, and now it's too late. So Zephaniah 2 goes right along with what's being said here in Luke 13. Okay.
Chris?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I thought you were saying goodbye.
No, I was
okay. I didn't know you were raising your hand.
Two hands. So when it says after the 70 years to call on the name of the Lord. And there's a few other
Where's
verses.
that at again? In Jeremiah?
Jeremiah 30, Jeremiah, well, it's a good question.
Was it 29? 20?
Yeah,
29?
29, I think.
Yeah, 10,
I
10
have it there.
through
What is
13.
29, 10 to 13, yeah. And it's also Zechariah, I have it here. It's also Zechariah 14. But there's a number of places in the Bible where it says, call him my name, and it points to after the 70-year tribulation, it points during the day of judgment. So that's when he gives his people a new heart and they can call on his name. So
Well, that fits with the drawing of the great multitude, with what we've learned, that they have a new heart. They already have a new heart, but
yeah,
they're out in the world, and they're living just like anybody else in the world, and so it's after the 70 years or after the tribulation, in the day of judgment, that this would seem to fit. And ye shall seek me and find me when ye shall search for me with all of your heart. And that is what is going to happen when the elect, the great multitude that are out there, hear the word. They're going to be drawn. And from their perspective, it's as though, well, I'm really interested in this, and I'm going to seek, look into God and seek God. But it's only because God has already saved them before he shut the door. It would seem to fit, in that way.
And that has no reflection on whether you seek him before the day of judgment, because that is just a command.
They maybe didn't seek him. I mean,
that's exactly
of
what I'm trying to
their
get
own
to.
will, they maybe didn't do anything. They just, were handed a tract and they read it.
But what about a person?
They could have crumbled it up and thrown it in the trash.
What about a person who did seek him before May 21, right? 2011. But these people are now finding that they're seeking him more, but not with the idea of getting salvation, but they're calling on his name even more than they were before May 21. Would that be a biblical thing? I'm not saying
I don't
that,
know what you mean. People before May 21 were seeking him. Then you mean they were under the hearing?
Yeah, they were
crying out
they were
for
calling
mercy.
out for, and then after May 21, they're crying out for mercy of the body, but even more than they were before May 21. So would that could mean, I'm not saying it's definite, that God did give them a new heart, because they are seeking. They're even crying out more now than they were before May 21, because they've gotten a new heart.
Crying out to be saved, crying out to be saved.
Saving of the body.
Saving of the body. The transformation. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. That at this time, it's becoming wearisome to be in this world, and we have a desire to depart. Is that what you mean? And to be with Christ, and we would be very, we would be very desirous to receive our new. We're willing to die. Oh Lord, if you want to take me, because then we'll go to be with the Lord until that last day. Or we're looking with excitement, good expectation for the coming completion of all things. Is that what you mean by calling out, or do you mean like actively saying, "Oh Lord"?
Because Harold Campen, not that I'm just saying he used to say years ago that there's double salvation, the salvation of the soul and salvation of the body. And some of his studies tied into calling on the name of the Lord after you're saved in the soul. You know, he tied that in. So I think that kind of fits.
There in Romans 8, God speaks of, the salvation of the creation and of the body. Where it says in verse 22, for we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now, and not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body. For we are saved by hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man seeth, why doth he yet hope for? But if we hope for that we see not, then do we with patience wait for it. And so the redemption of the body is language of salvation. And there is an inward desire, even a groaning, for the adoption, the redemption of the body. The more we struggle with this body, and from time to time fall into sin, or just the sin that resides in the flesh, it's something that is wearing to us and troubling to us, that we have to deal with the body as the flesh lusts against the spirit and spirit against the flesh. And it's just a longing, it's a similar longing. But previously we were crying out to be delivered in general, just, oh Lord, have mercy that I might be saved, that I might have eternal life. And now it's more specific, where there's even comfort in this, because if we were to sin, we know, well, by God's grace, that sin too is paid for. It's all forgiven. And I have the righteousness of Christ. But nonetheless, we desire perfection. We desire completion of salvation. And it's a excellent reason why we're looking into these things. And those who say, well, I don't see why you keep looking into the end of the world. Well, the end of the world means the salvation of the body. It's the time of the resurrection. And of course, we want to receive that completion of salvation, a new resurrected body.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, thank you. And let's go to Mandy. Mandy, we'll send you the link and you can take the mic.
Hi, can I ask a question, or are you almost done?
Oh, you can ask a question.
Okay. I have 3 scriptures and I have a question.
Okay.
Daniel 3:24 and 25.
Okay, Daniel 3:24 and 25. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonied and rose up in haste and spake and said unto his counselors, did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, true, O king. He answered and said, lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God.
Okay, thank you. And the next one is John 11:44.
John 11, verse 44. And he that was dead came forth bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, loose him and let him go.
And then finally, Romans 7:2.
Romans chapter 7, verse 2. For the woman which hath a husband is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband.
I'm just looking at the two words bound and loosed. Are we bound right now in hell in terms of we're waiting to be loosed for Christ to return?
Well, that's an interesting question. Now, as far as you tied together a couple of good verses with Romans 7 and John 11, because Lazarus was dead and he was bound in grave clothes, and then Christ raised him from the dead. He came out of the tomb, and Jesus commanded to take the grave clothes off of him, and so he was unwrapped. And that's the idea when we're in that marriage relationship to the law of God, and Romans 7 in that passage gets into that. We're in a condition of bondage to sin and to Satan. We're servants to sin and to Satan, and the deliverance that the gospel brings looses us, frees us from being bound to the law, and it also delivers us from death because the law demands death. And so coming out of the tomb, it's really a process. When Jesus commanded the disciples to remove the grave clothes, they would have begun unwrapping them, and that's what happens after we become saved. Over the course of time, our sense of bondage, or we've lived in a relationship with the law of God, maybe for many, many years, and we have to be, we are delivered because Lazarus is already alive. He's already out of the tomb, but he still has the grave clothes wrapped about him for a period of time, while others are helping him to take them off. And that's how the Lord has used the, opening up the eyes of certain people over the course of time, where they will teach others. He moves in certain ones, and they begin to understand there is no condemnation to those that are in Christ Jesus. We can read it. We kind of we get the idea, but it takes time to really get a deep down understanding of that, where we realize when I sin, it could be the leftover effects of having been dead and wrapped about in these grave clothes, and yet there's no condemnation. I am free. I am no longer condemned by the law in any way, because I have been set free. Another has died for me, and I have become married to him, the Lord Jesus Christ, and enter into a different relationship entirely, that is one of grace, and the law's part is to show love for the one that has redeemed me, and who I've entered into this spiritual marriage with. So that would be the general idea, I think, between these two passages, that when we come back to life, it's not like as soon as we are born again and God has saved us and we're no longer spiritually dead, that we lose immediately everything that related to our past spiritually dead condition. It takes time. And some people who maybe grew up in the world and spent decades living the life of a sinner, living under the law until God saved them. Well, it could take a little more time than maybe someone who was saved as a young child and grew up under the hearing of the gospel. But thank you.
Thank you.
For sharing those verses. And I would like to thank everyone for joining us tonight and sharing your questions and comments, and especially the Bible verses that we had a chance to read and consider. But we have come to the end of our time. Lord willing, we'll have another open forum program tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern and Monday through Friday. But for now, may you have a good night, and may the